All right, switching gears just a little bit, talking about social science, because humans are a key part of ecosystems. And our project is here at CIMAR, seeks to support effective management of fisheries and marine ecosystems by conducting economics and human dimensions research through partnerships and collaborations. And today we're just going to be kind of focusing on some of the human dimensions research. But also, we do this to try to understand the role of human behavior in fisheries, to improve outreach and communications, and to contribute to the well-being of communities across the region. So what do we do? Sometimes we do research that might be a little bit more on the kind of traditional academic side, which here are two articles that Jonathan and I have been co-authors on. The one on the left-hand side, I worked with some co-authors from across the globe to develop, what we termed a code of conduct for marine conservation. Since a lot of times when you're doing research with on marine ecosystems, you want to consider that the people that you're working with, and Jonathan will describe his research as well.
And in the study on the right, it was an interagency collaboration where in a series of case studies, we looked at the cultures of governance agencies themselves and how they're often in conflict with indigenous cultures and how that greatly hinders our efforts to implement indigenous knowledges within agencies and support indigenous lifeways, which, as we're increasingly trying to prioritize those efforts, we have to look at our intra-agency cultures and reflect on how we need to transform those.
But we also may do some research that I might consider or term issue spotting. This is some work that I did with Kirsten Leong, and what we did was try to understand what is the scope of regulatory compliance issues in the U.S. Pacific Islands region. We did this through about 30 interviews with what we termed compliance experts, across the region, and we developed a map, or we developed kind of what we call a little bit of a model of regulatory compliance and how compliance could be improved using non-instrumental means. But we also conduct what I would say is applied research, and this research is supposed to feed right into management. And this is some research that also worked with Kirsten Leong at the Science Center on. And the purpose was to see if we could further reduce protected species bycatch in the Hawaii longline fleet. So what we did is this is kind of boots on the ground work. We went around and we conducted 38 interviews with Hawaii longline captains and crew at Pier 17 and Pier 38, and tried to hear what are some solutions to these issues in their own words. If some of these folks aren't on the take reduction team or anything like that. And then what we did is we compiled those issues and kind of coded them thematically. And then we, based upon their ideas, to further reduce bycatch, we also looked at, what are the barriers to those ideas, both socially and technologically. And in the pictures there, you can see we conducted these interviews with some translation assistants. We have a research assistant there, and and sometimes the captains would be in the middle of dinner and would force us to eat some of this terrible food here. But we also conduct quantitative research or mixed method research, where we combine quantitative research with qualitative research methods. And this is some research that I did with Justin Hospital and Chris Boggs, who was formerly at FRMD. And we looked at the effect of big-eyed tuna catch limits on the Hawaii longline fleet. The Hawaii longline fleet is diverse, has vessels of different sizes, and some vessel owners have different permits. So we looked at basically back about a few years back, they had what we called regulatory closures or effective closures, where the fleet would reach their WCPFC big-eyed tuna catch limit, and there would be a period of time where the fishery was closed until they could go fishing again, after they had basically purchased some quota from one of the CIMAR or Guam or American Samoa. So in that interim, some vessels were still able to fish, but others were not. So we looked at, we interviewed folks to understand what those impacts were, and this figure on the right-hand side displays 4 different regulatory scenarios, and we found that basically small vessels were able to fish, in the IATTC or the Eastern Pacific area, and vessels with dual permits were able to fish, even during a regulatory closure. So this is just an example of how, like a policy may affect, different segments of the fleet differently. And then one more example of, mixed method research. This is some research I did with Michelle Chan. And what we did is we looked at how Hawaii limited entry permits changed hands over 30 years in the Hawaii longline fleet. And there's no cap on ownership in these permits. So if you look at the figure on the right-hand side, the dark blue are single permit holders. A little bit less dark is multiple permit holders or owners, and then the very top is the light blue is folks. That's just the top 4. And if you look at from 1991 to 2017, the share of the permits held by single permit holders decreased quite significantly. And the 2 top. And also along with the share of the permits, the top 4 had significantly more revenue and landings, especially as well. So, depending on how you looked at it, whether it was the permit holder, the name on the permit, or the permit applicant, which is the entity applying for the permit, the effects were a little bit more pronounced, but. Ultimately, it showed that with this policy, without an ownership cap, the fishery is becoming increasingly consolidated.
So through the development of research methodologies, the assessment of agency forms and surveys, and the evolution of terminology to reflect how communities think about their lives and relations, we've also been focusing on expanding NOAA's efforts to account for the full scale of social, cultural, and economic benefits of fisheries when considering human well-being, including the interdependency of human community well-being and more than human ecological systems. Through this work, we aim to more holistically understand what is important to and valued by the people we're in service to, and how that varies over time, place, and demographics, and the tangible steps NOAA can take to improve equity, abundance, and resilience. In recent years, there's been increasing interest in including cultural considerations within agency research and management, particularly in regard to prioritizing the species communities most cherish or are most concerned about, since we realistically don't have the capacity to focus on all taxa equally. Our past work on this has involved looking at how the species prioritized in NOAA management documents compare with those in integral Hawaiian texts. And going forward, we're collaborating with DAR and several community organizations to assess the species prioritized within community-produced documents, such as community-based subsistence fishing area management plans, and how the synthesis of these documents can steer agency efforts to synergize with community priorities. Similarly, as NOAA moves beyond single species approaches and into ecosystem-based management and implements more holistic human well-being and biocultural frameworks, there are endless variables that we could be monitoring in the seas, in the air, and on land, but we have to be intentional about how we devote our limited capacity and resources, especially in regard to sociocultural data, since this can often be a sensitive matter and often requires the volunteer time and labor of community members. To aid these efforts, we've been taking the initiative to ensure community voices don't get left out working to develop indicators based on both community and agency priority and concerns, particularly focusing on aspects of the social ecological system that directly connect to points of intervention where we know that actions within the purview of NOAA, partner agencies, or collaborating organizations have the ability to affect. It is indicators that readily translate into action, impact, and improve social ecological welfare. Also, some continuing work of ours is in examining the demographics of our fisheries and talking with those at the relative margins, such as our interviews with women in Fa'afafine in American Samoa who fish and glean. A main impetus for this work is to record their concerns and priorities, which often get left out through standard methods that focus on the general fisher population, as well as to understand the forms of fishing and relations with the sea, as well as the people involved who our agency might be neglecting to support.
So, we don't just, work on journal articles and things. A lot of times, we will write technical reports, data reports, things like that. And the idea is to, basically just feed the results directly into management. And, we'll also kind of, write some blog posts and things. We had a project on, an oral history project on Hawaii bottom fishing, and that's the one that almost all the way to the right there. We wrote a series of blog posts about bottom fishing. It's on the NOAA website. I think it's pretty cool if you want to check it out. But we'll also do some kind of service-oriented work. The far right, this is some work we did with the council and some seafood buyers in the region to try to get an understanding of kind of seafood inflows and outflows. We did a combination of kind of meeting facilitation with some note taking, and we fed the information back to the wholesalers that we're working with.
So in summation, we do a variety of things as social scientists within CIMAR. We do your typical peer-reviewed publications and technical reports, and we're increasingly doing direct service and assistance to communities and community groups, as well as meeting facilitation within our agency and outside, as well as increasing cross-jurisdictional and cross-organizational collaboration, as well as building those foundational relations, again, within and outside of our agency, as well as filling those puka, especially in regard to social research skills, since those are indeed skills that require expertise, as well as helping with communication, since communicating how all of our research coordinates with social, political, and cultural dynamics is a tricky thing sometimes, and we're super happy to help with that.
So we have a range of skills we use to kind of contextualize the work that others are doing, especially a lot of this work, a lot of other folks have done and presented today, as well as the practices that matter across the region. So, maybe a theme is that, we're a little bit more generalist or maybe a little more adaptable than what I would say is, a specialist, maybe a little bit less niche. But we do have a lot of specialized training in how to gather data from and with people, how to build research-related relationships equitably, and how to engage in knowledge co-production and talk about things like data sovereignty with communities, and particularly indigenous communities. And these are skills that we're happy to share.